Well, greetings, Training for Translators listeners. This is Corinne McKay with episode 20 of the Training for Translators podcast. I know I just released episode 19 not that long ago, but I had a short topic that I wanted to talk to you about. And as always, if you enjoy this podcast and you're not on the Training for Translators mailing list, you should be, because this podcast is based on my blog and newsletter articles, which you can read right there. So just hop over to trainingfortranslators.com. Scroll down to the bottom of the homepage or the sidebar of any blog post and subscribe. Okay, today's topic is a beginner miles and points trick that got me a free ticket to London. I make no secret of the fact that I am sort of 20% a frustrated travel writer. My next career is going to be being a travel writer. And I am a fanatical traveler, but to be honest, I am not a really hardcore miles and points person. I listen to a lot of travel podcasts and read a lot of travel blogs, but to be honest, the whole thing of having, 60 credit cards and juggling the annual fees and welcome bonuses and spending categories, trying to eat at restaurants with Z in the name on the 6th Thursday of the month because you can get 25x points is really not my type of thing. And by the way, if that sounds crazy, those are actual examples. One of my favorite travel podcasts is Frequent Miler on the Air. There's a link to that in the blog post that this podcast is based on, which I published on my website on November 13th, 2025. Or just search the word London. I think it's probably the only time I ever wrote about London, and you can read it. So on Frequent Miler on the Air, they just did an Ask Us Anything episode, and that was one of the questions is how many credit cards does each of the hosts have? And I think the average was about 60. I'll talk in a future episode about the credit cards that I use, but I have basically two business and two personal, and that's it. When I say that I am not really into the miles and points gaming, it's also because I would typically rather just shop for a good deal. And to be honest, they exist. I still need to write this trip up, but I went to Fiji in May with my best friend from high school, and we actually each paid US $1,500 each for the round trip airfare and 4 nights at a five-star resort. So, really, the only thing we paid for was food, which we were able to get an inclusive meal plan that was not crazy expensive. And we did a couple of day tours. But that whole trip, literally halfway around the world, cost me less than $2,000. And we stayed at the Marriott Momi Bay, which is the only five-star resort I have ever been to. Plus, also, I'm one of those strange people who actually loves every aspect of travel, even the things that other people find annoying. I love people watching in the lines and the boarding area. I love the little tiny snacks. I love watching the ill behaved animals. So I really don't care about lounge access or priority boarding because I don't really mind sitting in the general boarding area. And I almost never check luggage. And I have actually downsized from a standard carry on to an under seat carry on. So the luggage check, the free checked bag benefits that you get with frequent flyer status on many airlines are really of almost no appeal to me. I admit I should do more with miles and points, and I'm kind of an ideal candidate for that. I have really good credit, I have no debt, and I have never carried a credit card balance in my life. I should do more, but I just don't. I also think, although I don't do this either, that there is a lot of evidence to suggest that when it comes down to dollar for dollar, that you are better off getting a cash back credit card and just putting that money into your travel fund. So get a 1% or 2% cash back credit card and just dump that money into whatever fund you use to pay for vacations. But here is a really cool experience that I recently had that is perhaps of interest to any of you in the US who are self employed, and it may apply in other countries too. I'm not really familiar with how international credit card offers work. Earlier this year, in fact, in May of 2025, so not that long ago, I decided that I wanted to get a business credit card where I could earn some better points than I do on the ones I have right now, which are through Chase Bank. Applied for and was approved for the American Express Blue Business Plus credit card. It has no annual fee, and to get the welcome bonus, which was 15,000 American Express points, you only had to spend $3,000 in the first 3 months. So a lot of times when you see these welcome bonuses, you have to spend a massive amount of money. And I am just not that big of a spender. Plus, some of my bigger household expenses, we have to pay the credit card fee if we put them on a credit card. For example, in the city where we live, if you pay your property taxes, which for us are a pretty big expense, if you pay by credit card, you have to pay the credit card commission. So this was only $3,000 in 3 months. And by just putting my normal business expenses plus a few work related trips, most of which were then reimbursed by my clients, I ended up actually earning 22,000 Amex points since I opened the card in May. So I got the bonus and then I spent 7,000 or got 7,000 points from my own spending. Now, what do you do with 22,000 Amex points, which really is not that many? I know lots of people who have more than 100,000 Amex points, for example. Well, one day I was listening to the aforementioned Frequent Miler on the Air podcast, and they were talking about the best deals when you transfer your credit card points to an airline mileage program. Their top recommendation was transferring your Amex points to Virgin Atlantic because the combination that they transfer one to one and that Virgin Atlantic has particularly appealing points deals if you buy pretty far ahead. In fact, you can get a one-way ticket from New York to London for as little as 12,000 Amex points, which in the conventional wisdom of a credit card point being worth about 1 cent would only be 120 US dollars. And as luck would have it, two friends and I were hatching a plan to go to London this summer, then go on to Denmark and Holland. The podcast gave a really good tip, which is always check the award ticket availability before you transfer the points because you cannot reverse the transfer. Once you move your Amex points to an airline, you cannot move them back if it turns out that the ticket you want isn't available. And Frequent Miler was correct that I could have gotten JFK to Heathrow for 12,000 points. But another box ticked here, I have been wanting to try the Virgin Atlantic daytime transatlantic flight, which leaves JFK at 8 a.m. and gets to London at 8 p.m., to see if that would help with jet lag avoidance. So that cost me 20,000 points and $108 in taxes. Then I used my personal Southwest credit card to book a ticket from Denver, which is my home airport, to New York on Southwest. So I still feel like the, real miles points rabbit hole is more work than I want to put in because then to get the welcome bonus, you have to, switch all of your auto pays between those cards, track the progress. But this to me was pretty easy and really, really gratifying to get this transatlantic trip for $108 in taxes, and that's it. And I just wanted to mention one other thing on this Frequent Miler episode that struck me as something that I would do. If you are a member of a hotel chain loyalty program, check if they ever have points sales or if you can get some extra perks just because you booked with points. So my family are not luxury hotel people, no big surprise there, but when we go on road trips, we frequently stay at places that are in the Choice Hotels chain. So that's Quality Inn, Comfort Inn. Their lowest end is Econo Lodge. We sometimes stay there if we're kind of desperate, or hotels that are owned by IHG, which is Holiday Inn Express, and a lot of other more luxurious hotels. So both Choice and IHG run points sales at up to 40% off, which could be really appealing if you want to stay at a luxury hotel and pay 40% off for it. I have Choice Hotels Elite Platinum status, for which my family eternally mocks me like this is the lowest end, high end status that you can have. But Choice Hotels has some surprisingly fancy properties. And if I wanted to go to one of those, I think that I would probably look for one of these points sales. buy the points that I need to book the room for 40% off and just do that. And then another thing that I was unaware of is some of the higher end hotel chains give you some bonuses just because you booked with points. And it doesn't matter whether you earned the points or bought them. Even if you bought the points for no discount, you would still get these bonuses. The website NerdWallet, which you may be familiar with, is a, personal finance site, but they have a podcast I also really like called Smart Travel. And they wrote a blog post. NerdWallet Travel wrote a blog post about this concept, which is, for example, both Hilton and Hyatt, which are two fairly high end chains in the US, both waive the resort fee if you book with points. And to me, resort fees are extremely annoying because they're just charging you more for things that you don't have a choice to opt out of, right? And some of them include things that you're like, who does that? Using the landline in the hotel room, who does that anymore? You just use your cell phone. But a lot of them will. So Hilton and Hyatt waive the resort fee if you book with points, and Marriott gives you the fifth night free if you book 4 nights with points. So in that case, even if you just bought the points, you would still get some advantages. I got so excited about this free ticket to London that I then applied for an Amex personal credit card just because of this very attractive transfer partnership with Virgin Atlantic. And I will report back on how it goes when I go to Stonehenge this summer. So thanks very much for listening. This has been episode 20 of the Training for Translators podcast. The podcast is hosted by me, Corinne McKay, recorded using a Shure MV7 Plus microphone, and I record and edit it in Audacity, and it is hosted technologically on Libsyn. My website is trainingfortranslators.com, and I hope to talk to you in a future episode.